So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Reed. I am a professor and research centre director at Scotland's Rural College, visiting professor at the University of Leeds and Birmingham City University, places where I worked previously. And I have a range of policy roles and other things that I use to generate impact from my research on impact. And of course, that includes being chief executive of Fast Track Impact. Now, a few years ago, I wrote a book called The Productive Researcher, and I'm going to give you all a free copy of this as a thanks for coming on today's course. Um, so I'm just going to start my slides and then share in the chat. Um, so if you're watching this via video, I'm going to give you these links as well in an email. After today's course, you'll get the slides and any other links I put in the chat via email from Eventbrite. So don't worry about trying to click on everything immediately. So in the chat, you've got a copy now of the PDF version of this. Also in the chat is the audiobook version, if that's how you prefer to read your books, and a discount code to my new book, The Researcher's Guide to Influencing Policy. I should point out, if you do want to get hold of the hard copy, I've put a link there for you as well. There's, I think, 20 something copies left in existence. And once they go, there is not going to be a reprinting of this book. It is going to be moving to Routledge, but the Routledge book will not be out until 2026 at the earliest. It'll be a new edition. Not quite sure what it will be like, but what I can tell you is it will not be like this. This is we import these Hessian covers from France, and they're all individually hand bound by a traditional bookmaker in Yorkshire. So if you do want a hard copy, order sooner rather than later to avoid disappointment on that. So, what I'd like to do, if I may, is to start by explaining the approach that I described in the book and give you an opportunity to interrogate this, to really think quite deeply about this. This will be the most of the talking that I'll do in the session. But then we'll do a series of individual and then paired and then group tasks. We'll take a break around about halfway, so 11:30 is what I'm targeting for our break, and we'll have started workshop mode by then. And then after the break, we'll just remain in workshop mode, so it's going to be very hands-on. But as I said, I'll start by explaining what we're trying to do here. Now, I've called the book The Productive Researcher. Some people have suggested that's perhaps a bit of a misnomer because in the book and on this course, I talk as much about work-life balance as I do about productivity. I'm going to suggest that ultimately, when we are trying to produce more work more efficiently, that we need to think about our why. Why is it that we've gone on a course like this? Why do we want to be more productive? Is it that we want to try and achieve ever more productivity, more and more stuff for our employers, for our CVs? And for me, in a world that seems ever more commercialized, managerialized, instrumentalized, I find this kind of problematic. I want, personally, my why, I want to be more productive so that I can get my thinking time back, so that I can get my work-life balance back, so that it doesn't constantly feel like I am dashing from one thing to the next with no time to think, no time to breathe, feeling guilty when I'm at work because I'm not doing the things I should be at home, and feeling guilty when I'm at home because I've got all these work deadlines that are mounting up. If you feel like you are constantly just running to stay up, to keep up, sorry, with the pace of your life, then my goal today is to enable you to become more efficient, but not just so that you can produce yet more stuff, so that you can change your relationship with work and be happier about what you are producing and why you are producing it. So. Just get everyone muted again. This journey for me started with a bit of a mystery. Um, and this mystery can be summed up in this idea that it is possible to work less and achieve more. Now, there's some truisms in there and some things that are kind of obvious, but I want to unpack the less obvious aspects of this. And for me, the way that this first manifested was me and a colleague, now Professor Lindsay Stringer at University of Leeds. We both did our PhDs at the same time. We were early career researchers at the same time. And as we were trying to build our careers as early career researchers, we realized that we seemed to be producing more than average outputs, whether that be grants or papers, whilst doing a full teaching loads as early career researchers, but working less hours than the majority of our colleagues. And while everyone else complained about how much work they had and how many hours they'd worked that weekend and how little sleep they had, we were sitting there feeling kind of guilty that, yeah, we're not really working as hard as everyone else. What's going on here? And over the years, I met other people who were similar. They seemed to produce a lot of stuff, but didn't seem to be working as many hours as everyone else. As an interdisciplinarian, I decided to start looking for what was going on. Talking to Lindsay and others, a few ideas started to occur to me. I started to look from ecology to business management. I'm quite diverse in the disciplines that I work in. And I found this list in the Times Higher Education, the 10 most prolific and most cited researchers. And I wondered, are you all just workaholics? Or actually, have you found similar things? I wonder if I could interview some of these people. And so I did. And the answers that I heard from these people surprised me. I confess that I had expected that I would hear people talking about serious amounts of work, serious lack of sleep. But actually, what I heard was people who were, like me, Lindsay, and the growing number of people in my network, perfectly happy with their life work balance. And they, of course, had different shapes and sizes to this. For some people, it was about working 9 to 5 because they have a young family, for example. And for others, it was about the flexibility that I can work at any time of the day, but I'm not working too much. There was one person who it was about traveling the world and going to amazing places with amazing people and going to conferences and doing field work and kind of taking sneaky extra days here and there and absolutely taking all of her holidays. And I think that this stands in direct contrast to what we typically hear. The stats on screen here were published at the time that I published the book, but they've only gone the wrong way since then. And I think that it's not a coincidence that we now see a higher incidence of both physical and mental health problems across the academy. People burning out because they are simply working too many hours. And so, as I began to piece this all together, I began to come up with a bit of a theory, which I'm going to sum up for you in a moment. And I'm going to give you some very practical ways in which you can apply this. We'll think about an application in relation to writing, because that's one of the things that most of us have to do. Certainly, as early career academics, if we want to get tenure, we need to publish. And yet, it is the thing that we end up putting to those back burners that ends up getting delayed. And so we'll think in particular about that. But before I dive into the theory and explain how this works in some detail and give you a chance to interrogate me, I think it's important to just back up for a moment and have a think about some of the problems with the fact that I am telling you this. And so instantly, it's very easy to look and see that I am white. I'm male. I'm almost 50. I've got a professor in front of my name. I'm a cis male. I have heterosexual privilege. I have many other forms of privilege that intersect to make life easier for me in a system like this than it is for many of you. And so I want to acknowledge that and to acknowledge that it has indeed made things easier for me. But at the same time, I think that there are many of us here today who might look like we have all of these intersections of privilege, and like me, you may have them. But at the same time, there may be many other areas of disadvantage or challenge which are hidden from view. My wife, my daughter, both have quite severe dyslexia. And that means if you have a job which requires reading and writing, like most of us, that everything takes longer, is harder. And that is not fair. And I'm delighted that more and more of us are celebrating this neurodiversity and acknowledging the benefits that these things can bring to our lives and to the teams that we are part of. But many of us still don't talk about these challenges. Maybe these are physical impairments that you have that just make getting through day-to-day life much more challenging for you than it is for other people. And for many of us, and as I was saying, the stats are clear. This is actually mental health problems. For me, this is the hidden challenge that I have faced that has required me to take significant amounts of time off work. That has required me to say no to multiple opportunities. Um, and it's been so debilitating that I have considered whether I could continue on a number of occasions, but managed to keep going, in part because of the things that I have learned and had to learn, which have built into this theory, which I'm going to be describing in a moment. And so, to keep this very basic and simple, I don't want to trigger anyone. I experienced really severe abuse growing up from preschool all the way through my teenage years and into early adulthood. That left me with a number of psychological issues. I've suffered from anxiety throughout my career, bouts of depression that have taken me to the edge on multiple occasions. I have a thing called night terrors where I will wake up and hallucinate my nightmares. It's a form of sleepwalking, effectively. And it's so terrifying because these are real. They're in the room with me that I can't get back to sleep. And I regularly suffer from insomnia. And for anyone who suffered that, which I'm sure you have from time to time, you will know how it can just take you unawares. And whatever you had planned for the following day is suddenly like walking through treacle or just doesn't happen. Uh, I once had to call in sick on the morning of a plenary talk for a conference from my funder. The funder had put me on first, the first plenary talk of their conference. And that morning I knew that if I stood up, then there was a very high likelihood that I would get a panic attack. For me, sadly, panic attacks will happen quite often when I'm in front of a large audience, which as an academic is a bit of an occupational hazard. Um, and I figured, you know what, even if I manage to do this without a panic attack, there's a good chance that I'm going to burst into tears when I get asked questions. Um, and I figured, that's not probably the look my funder's looking for. They don't need to know why I'm not well. All they need to know is I can't do this, not today. And so I called in sick the day before. Um, it's easy again to just look at my gender and assume, well, there's been a woman probably behind me, powering me to success. And yes, my wife went part-time when we had children. Um, but that part-time was 36 hours per week. She was a hospital doctor and she had to stay away for work. And so when she was away for work, those 3 to 4 days per week, she couldn't just change her schedule because I had an important engagement, a meeting, a conference. I had to say no to those. And clearly, that is not the same as being a single parent. But throughout my career, um, I have I have had these limitations. And for me, it is the mental health challenges that have been the greatest. I say this not because I want to make you feel sorry for me, but to say that many of us have these hidden challenges that we don't talk about and that I believe we should talk about more. That we assume that the grass is greener, that it's easier for others, but in fact, it might not be. Uh, and we should assume perhaps less. And my hope is that as I describe some of the challenges that I have faced, that you can see that despite levels of challenge that are debilitating on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis, for months at a time, when you are struggling just to work, it is possible to continue. It is possible to use the kind of techniques that I'm going to be describing to you here today. If nothing else, to just get enough done to get through. And for me, that has been my modus operandi for months at a time, just to somehow get enough done to keep my job, rather than going for any kind of stretch goal, just to get the basics done. So let me share the ideas now, and hopefully, as a result, you're paying attention. You're not kind of down weighting this all and saying, "Yeah, well, that's fine. It works for someone like Mark." But if you could see what my life was like, yeah, no chance. Um, and I'm going to start with a truism, and I don't mean this to be insulting, because we all, of course, know this. Um, but I want to unpack this, if I may. It is the idea that we can become more productive in order to spend less time working. For me, this is the why, that we are becoming more efficient, we're becoming more productive, we're procrastinating less, all of that stuff, not just so that we can produce more and more for the system, but so that we can actually get less time working, more time just being. And the reverse of this, of course, that we can spend less time working to become more productive. And of course, we all get this. We know that this is true. There have been studies that have done this for the scales of entire economies that show that when you make people work too many hours, for every additional unit of time you force people to work, you get a declining return on that productivity in terms of widgets made or whatever it is that you're trying to produce. And we all have personal experience of this, don't we? Those all-nighters we pulled in our early career, or maybe you're still doing this. um, and it's kind of 2 in the morning, and you are going at a snail's pace now, but you are determined to get this finished before you go to bed. It is not the best work that you are doing, and you're going slowly. Had you just closed your laptop, gotten a decent sleep, and got up the next morning to finish this off, you would have done much better work and you'd have done it much faster. Yeah, we've all been there. We all know that. The problem is that it's hard to take our own advice. Uh, we all have time management tools, apps, techniques, things that we've been taught earlier in our careers, books that we've read. But the problem is that we don't put them into practice. And for me, it's because they don't go to a deep enough level. And so, what I want us to do today is to think much, much more deeply. Here are some quotes from some of the people that that I interviewed for the book. You can have a look. I think it's chapter 5. Many more pearls of wisdom from these people, but also from the broader literature and the people in my network. But if you want to boil this technique down to its simplest form, this is not actually a technique. It is a way of thinking. It's much, much deeper. And if I were to sum this up in a single word, that word would be priorities. Perhaps I could upgrade that to the word purpose, because the kind of priorities I'm talking about here are not just your most urgent and important to-do list items that you've put into some 2 by 2 matrix. Yeah, a useful time management tool. But what I'm talking about here are the things that are most deeply important to you, those purpose-driven priorities. That's what I'm talking about today. And so, what I'd like to do is to pause for a moment. I'm going to explain a bit more, uh, kind of give you a bit of a diagram that explains how this works, give you a little bit of the kind of the science behind this, and um, some practical applications of this. But I'd like you to all, for me, just do a little exercise for a moment. It's a very simple question, but what do you love most about your job? I put it on screen earlier, but I didn't actually ask you to write your answer. In the chat, I'm just going to write it down. What do you love most about your work? So we're going to go professional here. Your work. Think of a time when you came home from work and you were just like, wow, I got to do this today. Can you believe? What a privilege. I love what I do. What are the things that give you that real buzz, that sense of satisfaction? In the chat, please. Right. So some themes emerging, creativity, lots of people talking about just the incredible people that they get to make, the connections that come. Um, Lots of people talking about being able to learn new things, whether it's from the literature, from the people that they're bumping into. Or maybe it's just, yeah, that process of discovering new things, being curious. Basil, academic freedom. A few people talking about impact in various ways, whether that's impacts on our students, enabling them to grow, um, or things in the outside world, um, having meaningful engagement with community partners. Thanks, Aoife. Roxana, working on urgent topics that matter, that help find new strategies and solutions. Beautiful. So, if you've written your answer to this, I wonder, can you just now take a step back? And a couple of questions now for you to answer just in your own self, not to put into the chat. As you look at your answer to these questions, can you see implicit in these a part of your identity? Who are you? A work identity that you can see implicit in this. So, I don't know, I'm a lifelong learner. Um, yeah, I'm a researcher, but I'm a kind of researcher that discovers new things. Actually, this is all about adventure for me. I'm a connector. I can't help but connecting with people and connecting people to each other. I'm a networker. I'm an impactor. I make a difference. I'm a carer. I care about what happens to other people, and that's why I'm trying to make a difference. What are these identities that you see implicit in your answer? Secondly, what are the values that might be implicit, sitting beneath those identities? Perhaps you said that you are a creative person. Well, I guess creativity could be a value. I can live life creative. I can live life curious. I can be as curious as a father as I can be a researcher and teach my children to never lose their sense of curiosity. Perhaps it is a sense of altruism that is driving this desire to help others. Um, perhaps it is a value around freedom that drives my creativity, that drives all of this. Who knows? A sense of gratitude. What are the values that underpin your work identities, that animate, that inspire these things? And then finally, as you sit back from all of that, I'm going to suggest that in your answer to this incredibly simple question, an answer that you were smiling about as you were writing, I saw some of you, in that you have implicit your sense of purpose in work, the meaning you derive from work. That's why you love what you love, because you get to express parts of who you are that are consistent with your values. And so I'm going to suggest that it is at this intersection between our identities and our values that we find these purpose driven priorities that I've been talking about. And what we are trying to cultivate in the approach that I'm describing here is a positive feedback loop. By calling to mind and getting clearer than ever before on these purpose driven priorities, I am now able to focus on things that motivate me. Now, this is not to say that we're going to put all of our day-to-day tasks, which might bore or frustrate me, aside and only focus on me, me, me. Far from it. I'm going to suggest that a very small amount of time on a regular basis, focusing on these purpose-driven priorities, will create the motivation that will now enable you to focus more than ever before, to stop procrastinating, to put all distraction aside, and not only come back to those priorities on a daily or on a weekly basis and continue that positive feedback loop, but to just get on with those really difficult tasks or annoying tasks in your day and start to become significantly more efficient. Now, what's going on here is there's a number of things. We're going to look after the break at a theory from psychology that explains this, and we'll go quite deep into that. But very simply, another thing that's going on physiologically is that as I start my day or start my week doing something, probably work related, but it could actually be some kind of creative task or a self-care task that has that deep purpose-driven connection. I get this sense of can do, this sense of efficacy, this sense of self-worth that now puts all of these happy hormones into my bloodstream. So that as I now start my day, I start my day with a sense of inspiration, with a sense of efficacy that now enables me now, with that motivation, to just get on with whatever it is that I have to do. And very specifically, what we're trying to do here is not just to create this positive feedback, but to replace a negative feedback loop that many of us are not aware of. And so, on your Monday morning, do you sometimes start your day with a sigh? You open your laptop, press the on button of your computer, and there's this sigh that comes to you. Maybe it's a daily experience, I hope not. But where does that come from? And we're going to look after the break at a number of sources, but it could be something else for you. But very often it is this sense that, yeah, I can see what I've got in my diary for the rest of this week. I can see that key task that I've got to somehow get done by the end of this week. And me, do that? I do not have time. I do not have capacity. I don't have the intelligence to do this. How on earth I managed to get this job and people think I can do it, I have no idea because that imposter is speaking so loudly in my ear that I become filled with fear, with doubt. And so let's just spend a bit more time answering all those emails that I probably don't need to do quite as urgently as the thing that is actually due by lunchtime today. Maybe it's perfectionism. Um, I can't get that draft finished because I just keep changing and changing and changing again. Great, I've got a draft, but I can't bear to send it to my co-authors because they're going to see everything that's wrong, let alone submit it for publication because now they're going to get all the peer review reports at the same time as me, and they're going to see everything that's wrong with this, and I'm just going to be, yeah, paralyzed by this. And so I go around in circles. And again, um, we start that negative feedback loop. Um, or I'm trying to knuckle down, but actually, all of a sudden, I just realized, oh, I promised so and so that I would give them this yesterday. I didn't. I better just quickly interrupt what I'm doing and go back to my email and send it. And at that point, I know I'm seeing an email from my line manager. Oh, I better respond to her because that's really important. And you know what? The time's kind of disappeared. I'll just finish off all the other emails that have appeared, and the time just disappeared. Failure baked into academic life, whether it's your latest manuscript that's been rejected or given some fairly damning feedback, or a grants application. I got one last week that gave me a massive bout of imposter syndrome. Um, we end up, without realizing it, starting our day, starting our week with this really subtle sense of impending doom, the fear, a subtle sense of doubt, of inefficacy. And it is this, I suggest, that feeds our distraction and our procrastination, which is why now, when we're meant to be getting on with stuff, we discover that I haven't actually started those more challenging tasks until 11 o'clock. Where did the time go? And we've got a problem. And so I'm going to suggest a very simple thing to try this out. And we're going to go through a series of exercises to help you choose a purpose-driven priority that you can squeeze into a very small amount of time. And you may already begin to think of things and hold them lightly because we're going to go through a very specific series of steps that will identify some specific tasks that are going to have a disproportionate impact on that positive feedback loop in terms of creating motivation. But once you've found those tasks and you start doing them, 10 minutes per day, ideally working up to half an hour per day, that's your goal, or once a week. So this could be half an hour on a Monday morning before you open your email, or up to an hour. Now that's what we're aiming for, an hour on a Monday morning before we open our email. And see what this does in terms of your motivation and how that then impacts your ability to just start your day, your week, motivated, empowered, and able to get the important things done. Now, at this point, a lot of people are already objecting internally. They're saying, Mark, if you could see how busy my schedule was, you would see I cannot afford an hour on a Monday morning. No way. Something else is going to have to give. My experience of this is that it is so effective that when you do this and you see the impact it has, you protect that hour with your life because you know that that is what actually is enabling you to retain the level of focus and productivity you need to actually get this week's work done. But the other issue people have at this point is that they are not willing to give themselves permission. They feel like it's somehow selfish because what I'm suggesting is that you spend time doing something which is a priority for you. And I'm instantly going to suggest that there's a problem that many of us will be experiencing right now in terms of our own self-esteem. If we do not believe we are worth an hour on a Monday morning for something that we care deeply about. And this is going to be a work-related task, most probably. And if not, it's probably going to be a self-care task that you're going to be doing. And I want you to just ask yourself, if this was one of your, someone who you were line managing, a more junior member of staff, and they come to you and they say, I want to start just chipping away an hour per Monday morning at that paper from my PhD that I never got written up, at building some impact type capacity. I've been wanting to start a blog, for example. I wanted to start doing that and beginning to get a few skills in this kind of impact area. I decided that I want to go for a walk, clear my head, and actually during work time just do this as some self-care because I've realized I've been getting really unfit, and I think it would do me good. Would you say to your colleague, no, an hour out of your work day, you should be focusing on the things that I want you to focus on. You should be focusing on this job. No, of course you would not say that. And so I'm asking you to give yourself the same compassion that you would give a colleague who came to say, 1 hour out of 37, I would like to spend on a priority that is for me. So give yourself permission and try this out. Now, this stands at variance with a very common technique that, in my experience, most academics I know use. And it's described after the name of a book called Eat That Frog. And it's the idea that if I've got a whole lot of really difficult things, so a pile of marking, a section of a paper that I'm really struggling with, whatever it might be, I start by doing that because once I've achieved that, the rest of my week is just easy from there. It's downhill. Brilliant. The problem, of course, is that negative feedback loop, which instantly sends you into a spiral as you look at that challenging task. And so you delay, you procrastinate. What a lot of us do is we say, if we can get those difficult, annoying things done, then I will reward myself at the end of the day or at the end of the week. If I have done enough of my marking, if I've managed to write enough words on my thesis or whatever it is, once I've reached that quota, then I will give myself a break. Friday afternoon is going to be for doing something I want. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, I'm going to now do something, but I have to earn this. I have to deserve this. And of course, the problem is that because I start with that negative feedback loop and I procrastinate and I distract myself, and I do so on a fairly regular basis, 4 o'clock comes and I'm nowhere near having made that quota or deadline. And so I work to 5 o'clock and it turns into 6 o'clock. And I realize I'm going to have to go and get dinner and probably open my laptop once I get home. And eventually I'm done. I go to my bed later than I'd planned. I wake up the next morning and I promise myself, today will be different. And if I can do this better, I'll reward myself tonight. But a little voice says to me, you won't do that, will you, Mark? You're not going to reward yourself. And of course, I'm now tired as well. Added to this negative feedback that now means, again, I get stuck in that loop. I procrastinate, I distract myself, and away we go. And that loop continues. If you're someone who rewards yourself with an easy Friday, an early weekend, a passion project on a Friday afternoon, how often does that happen? Yeah, I've seen it all, and so rarely does it work. So counterintuitively, what we're doing here is we are front loading the reward. And again, it feels selfish, it feels wrong, morally wrong. But what I'm going to suggest is that when you see the impact this has on your productivity, then you will see that actually your friends and your colleagues will thank you for this as well. Your people outside work for getting more work-life balance, as well as your colleagues, because you're actually producing more in your work week, and you will stop feeling guilty about it. But it's one of these things, seeing is believing. I can give you the evidence, and we'll look more at the psychological evidence for this after the break. But you need to try it out. So let me give you a final slide and apply this to writing. So first of all, I think that there is this fallacy that many of us have that the regularity of our writing is more important. Sorry, the fallacy is that we have to write in at least a day. We need long durations to be able to write. And my message is that regularity is actually much more important than duration. And so I'm going to challenge you, find someone who's got a management role who still writes first authored publications in your institution and ask them, how do you do that? And most of these people will tell you that they learned how to chunk write. And sadly, many of them only learned how to do that once they got into their management role and discovered that their time was no longer their own and they were unable to protect the amount of time that they had previously believed was the minimum required to be able to write anything meaningful. And it's kind of obvious when you begin thinking about this. If I have a writing habit of writing 1 hour per Monday morning before I open my emails, then I don't need all of that time to get back into that space of writing because, oh, yeah, I remember exactly where I was last week. I pick up where I left off. And now there are techniques that you need to use for this. Different people have different things. For me, this is about coming up with a really detailed outline of what I'm going to write. And this is now paragraph by paragraph and kind of bullet points within that. So now I'm kind of reviewing where I've got to. Great, here's the next paragraph I'm working on. Bum, 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 bum. Great. So bullet point one, and I start writing. And I've got a little timer on, so 5 minutes before I'm going to have to go to my 10 o'clock meeting. I know I need to start wrapping things up. There's a few more ideas in my head. I need to add some extra bullet points. Maybe there's a new paragraph over here. Great. Job done, finish, go to my 10 o'clock meeting with this sense of, yeah, I actually did some good writing. That sense of self-efficacy, that inspiration, this paper is taking shape, whatever it might be. Um, and I then check back in with myself. I'm looking forward all week to next Monday morning, assuming you love writing like me. And if not, then choose something else. But I check in again and instantly, great, I pick up where I left off. I do chunk writing in half-hour blocks sometimes, and that's kind of more if I can have to split this up over the course of a week for a deadline. It is possible to chunk write, and I'm saying to you now, you can learn this now before you're forced to, and it will enable you to get more done. Um, I've often been asked to mentor people who have told me that they don't have time to write. And when we really get down to it, yeah, we can try and get a strategy that will get you a buyout from your teaching or whatever else it might be. But actually, it tends to come down to confidence. And I'm going to suggest that actually what you need to work on much harder is your mental writing environment. Um, and so we're probably all familiar with the idea that I'm going to go to the library to write on my laptop. I'm going to tidy my room. I'm going to make myself a beautiful cup of tea or coffee. Whatever it might be, you've got the perfect writing environment. Great. But we haven't paid attention to what's in our head. And so I start to write, and I've got a review or two on my shoulder, activating my imposter syndrome or my perfectionist. My people pleaser tells me that I've just started writing, but I do really need to quickly go and tell this person something because I forgot, and boom. I take that hour and it's just me. I've got nothing at the end of it. And how many people are in that situation? I make the time for writing, but at the end of it, I've got nothing to show. And so what I'm in a habit of doing is to try and become much more mindful to that sigh. Yeah, I'm not feeling in love with this morning. Yeah, I wonder why. There's just something here. Okay, I'm going to not write. Instead, I'm going to put on the kettle to boil. I'm going to go have a little walk around my apartment, around the window, around the garden, down the road, and back again, and just ask myself, what's going on here? And it may be that the first 2 or 3 of my 1 hour blocks of writing are actually spent working out why I feel as I do and sorting that out. And maybe go and rereading a positive review that I got, something I actually got published, and getting into this place of, you know what, I can. And I start to tackle these issues, these negative feedbacks. We're going to discuss that more and think a bit more deeply about that after the break. And I'm going to give you lots of advice online as well in terms of how you might go about tackling these. But I tackle them, I call them to consciousness, and I tackle them rather than trying to force through and write when I haven't got the right mental environment. In my book, pages 130 to 131, you can read much more about writing circles. It doesn't work for all disciplines. You need ideally to have two or three co-authors or more for this to work effectively. But you can do that formally, you can do it informally. It can be a great way of writing much more than you would otherwise be able to write in terms of number of outputs per words and hours that you actually write. Other writing techniques in the book, I've got my guide on how to write a literature review in a week. That's a narrative literature review. But I can, if you're interested, give you some of the stuff that I'm now doing in terms of training people how to do systematic reviews, rapid evidence syntheses. But we're looking at a week of work full time to actually complete a rapid evidence synthesis. To the kind of the first draft stage. I mean, a few more iterations before it's actually publishable and published, of course, but it can be faster than you think. Also, in the email that I'll send around, I'll give you my link on my slides on how to write a highly cited paper for people in the UK, how to write a 4-star paper. But finally, we've all heard of shut up and write sessions. You can turn them into shut up and read sessions. So if the thing that is inspiring you is just getting back into the literature, feeling like you're a researcher again because you're reading, then maybe your Monday mornings are to read a paper. And you're building accountability into your reading or writing by saying every fourth Monday, first Monday of the month, I'm going to do this now with a colleague, someone that does similar stuff to me. I've wanted to get back in touch with them. Great. Now we're taking it in turns to choose something to read, a paper, a chapter. And by the end of that, we've had our 3 weeks to read 3 hours. Yeah, we won't be able to read everything in detail, but I've had 3 hours of reading. Now the fourth hour, I'm discussing what this means. I'm learning from someone else. I'm reconnecting, having that human contact, and I've got that accountability built in. And the final thing is to diary commitments before accepting them. So you're asking me to do anything that I think is going to take half an hour or more. I'm going to look in my diary and say, right, here is the half hour. I'm going to block that out in my diary. And then I'll tell you, I will give this to you by 3 p.m. On Friday, the such and such date. And it's an incredibly simple thing to do, but it has this huge impact because what many of us do is, great, I'll give it to you by the end of the month. And there are a whole lot of people I've said I'll give stuff to at the end of the month. The last week of the month comes and I'm looking and I'm realizing, how on earth am I going to give all these people these different things? And I end up working evenings and weekends to complete all of that work. And the people have had to wait the entire month for me to do a rush job the night before because I didn't make time for it. And instead, your PhD students, for example, will love you if you say to them, great, I need a day to review this chapter. This is the day I'm going to review it in a month's time, maybe in 2 months' time. Give me that the day before. I will give you a 24-hour turnaround on this. So now they are managing their time to finish drafting it. They send it to you, and by the end of the next day, you've given them their feedback. And it seems like you're just incredibly fast and efficient, but the reality is you just managed your time. But it's surprising how few people do that and what a difference it can make. So a lot of this will be things that a lot of us do already. I wanted to finish with some practical ideas, not just the deep stuff, so that you've all got something you can grab hold of and go away and try and do. But the core idea is to start thinking differently about your work and your relationship with work, to start asking those why questions. And that's where we're going to go in workshop mode after we've spent some time in discussion. So we're going to go for our break no later than 11:30, which gives us plenty of time for discussion and to start some of the workshop activities. But at this point, where are you at? Questions, thoughts, objections. Actually, Mark, this would not work for me. Here's why. So loads of great stuff in the chat already. Thanks, Imogen. Shut up and focus sessions because yeah, we're all together just being accountable to do something important. Great. And you can do that at lots of different scales with lots of different people and groups. Yeah. So I'll make sure I put the link to the information about the systematic review in the chat as well. Sorry, not in the chat, in the email afterwards, just to save me now. Yeah. So Charlotte's saying a colleague and I put in a minimum of 30 minutes to write together every day in November and December, and it was transformational. I've had people write to me who have said that they've tried what I suggested, an hour per Monday morning, and they used it to write. They'd already collected the data, or whatever it was that they were basing their paper on. But approximately a year later, people come back to me to say, yeah, I wrote it. It is possible. And you know what? How many things have you got on back burners? You might say, a year, that's far too long. I need to make a quicker plan. How many things have you got on back burners that you've had on a back burner for more than a year? And instantly, just doing this means, yeah, a year from today, that will be under review. Yeah, thanks, Arisha. Email culture is a real problem, and maybe others share what you're doing in this area. So for me, my research teams, we have a culture, a rule that just says that there is nothing that can happen that is so urgent that it requires a reply that day. As long as we can aim to get back to each other within 24 hours, that's good enough. And we have ways of getting in touch with each other if there's something really urgent, especially if there's someone on some kind of project where it is possible you could need me urgently. Great, you can pick up the phone to me. But if nobody's phoning me, then the assumption is that there's nothing urgent, which instantly now enables me to focus without any sense of concern that there could be something really important sitting there in my email. Yeah, whatever it is can wait, potentially until tomorrow. If I'm on a roll here, I'm going to just keep on that roll and then go to dinner, have a good sleep, and wake up and see what's in my email tomorrow. Could you do that? Most people could not do that. It's incredibly difficult. And if you can't, you're definitely not alone. But it suggests that actually email has power over you. And my question is, what is that psychological power? And how can you defeat that psychological power rather than come up with any fancy email productivity technique or tool? Yeah, thanks, Matt. We need to know what that purpose is, and it's not clear for most of us. And even if you think it is clear, actually, it will become a lot clearer once we do the exercises that are coming. Jill, just learning not to jump and say yes when things land on your desk, and to prioritize your own priorities. And of course, there's a limit to that. We have to be a team member. But I think that very often there is a gendered element to this. So without trying to be too controversial, I would appreciate if there's any women who'd like to speak to this, perhaps hear some voices, because I'm going to struggle to keep up with the chat. But it's very often that we find that it is the men in a department who spend most of their time working from home, who have very restrictive office hours, with the expectation that others will be there to pick up any loose ends, any students in crisis. And they do. And they're usually the women. Um, and for me, some very difficult but explicit conversations that need to be had around expectations and how we all find time to do the things that are important to ourselves, whatever our gender. Uh, anyone fancy talking to this, especially the women amongst us? But if you prefer, we can write in the chat. And at any point, if you want to say something a bit controversial, drop down from everyone to my name. You can write anonymously. I'll read your comment, but not who you are. So Nobody else wanted to comment on this kind of gendered element. Oh, there's someone saying, I think there is a major usual suspects thing around the unworkloaded extras. Yeah, who are those people? What criteria do they fit? Um, yeah, how fair is that? What could we be beginning to do about that? Yeah. Um, Yeah, and yeah, conflicts with childcare, evenings. Yeah, we need to really think a lot more about that. A lot of us, departments, sorry, universities are now getting Athena Swan accreditation, but yeah, this is a culture thing, and there are certain people who just ignore, and we need to actually face that one down, I would argue. Good. Um, So loads of really great practical tips. Please keep them coming. Do read through these, see what people have got to say. Um, yeah, Laura, strict rule, no work in the evenings and weekends. And I'm accountable to my wife and children on that. If I'm sitting on my phone, they can say to me, Dad, are you doing your emails? Are you doing work? And yeah, but yeah, if you don't have someone to be accountable, then just taking that email app off your phone, for example, or putting it to a screen far away. So you have to make that conscious effort to go to it, for example. Um, Lots of things that we can do there. Yeah. So, um, yeah, Philippe also saying the same thing. Yeah, family is a great way of keeping you accountable on that. And the younger your kids, the more accountable you will be if you attempt to do it. But at the same time, yeah, for me, this is it's about flexibility. I'm trying to get my hours in for my work week because I take my Fridays off. So I've spoken to my line manager about this. I'm effectively working a 4 day work week. Um, but yeah, of course, I will finish whatever work tasks are required on my Friday morning before I jump on my bike. Yeah, my phone will be with me. Anyone can call me. I will check in the middle of the day if there's any urgent emails, and again at the end of the day. So yeah, officially it's a work day, but I'm actually on my bike, and to be honest, I don't always check my emails. But I finish work for the week. And to make that work, I do work then laptop in the car outside kids' clubs and such like. And that flexibility is what I value to then be able to take my Fridays pretty much. And of course, important meetings, whatever, I'll interrupt that. But where I can, that'll be from my laptop in my van rather than if I can help that. And of course, we don't all have that flexibility, but it is worth asking yourself, are there things like that that you could do? At the moment, actually, I am going to show you my background. Not a very nice background, I will confess. So this looks like I'm in a very cheap hotel. Actually, this is a cell in a monastery. So this is a Benedictine monastery that I'm staying in. I was struggling with my mental health coming into winter. The Monday sigh was real. And I figured, yeah, I need to do something better. And so I started to come to this monastery nearby for the last service of the night on a Sunday night, stay over, depending on how I sleep, then getting up as I did this morning for the 4:30 a.m. service, and then the 6:15 service. Latin plain chant, don't understand a word anyone's saying, but just that place of peace to start my week with spiritual practice. It's not work related. I start my day early because of how it's been shifted. I will finish my day early and I will go home. My bike is in my van. I'll go home by our forest and cycle and get some self-care in. What are the things that you can do and how can you be accountable on this? I've got a booking every Sunday night now for the winter. That's all. But um, yeah, what are you going to do? So, any other thoughts, questions, objections? Where are you at? Please do feel free to raise a hand. Yeah. Elaine, cycling or running to and from work. Yeah. Are there some self-care things that you need to start thinking about? Good. So what we're going to do in that case is we're going to move to our first task. Um, um, yeah. Okay. Actually, there's a question coming from Sarah, and let me just have a quick think in terms of things that I regularly hear. So, someone was saying, "Yeah, I don't actually have control of my time," and of course, there are some assumptions I'm making that we can be flexible. Maybe you can't. So maybe you're coming in from professional services. A lot of professional services contracts and expectations are you are in the office Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. Maybe you're in a postdoc position. You're told what you have to do each day. You've got a clear kind of work schedule. It's not up to you to choose what you want to do, or for whatever other reason, you've got a line manager who is not going to give you any flexibility. And what I suggest in those kind of scenarios is that you look at your contract. And most of our contracts will have a fixed number of hours that we're expected to deliver. They may include lunch breaks as part of that. For example, I am now going to collect up my lunch breaks. I'm going to spend half an hour for lunch, which is adequate for lunch. And that's now 2.5 hours of me time that I am going to spend. Um, Whether I tell my line manager or not, because I am contractually allowed to do that. And I'm going to spend that not eating lunch, but doing something motivational instead. Um, One of the strategies that I use and that I recommend to people with difficult line managers who are looking for more flexibility in work is to get clearer with your boss about your goals. So, exactly what is it that you expect me to be achieving by the end of this year? How does that work out per month? How does that work out per week? And now, great, we've got some really specific expectations of everything I have to achieve each week. I am now going to send you an email on a Friday to tell you how I have achieved all of those things and anything extra that I throw in for extra value. I make sure, of course, that these are achievable. And now my task is, by being super focused and motivated, to ensure that I achieve all of those goals in less than my contracted hours. And as long as nobody's got some kind of timestamp machine that you have to stamp in and stamp out of, and I've never seen that in any university, then you now have a contract effectively with your line manager that says, I am delivering everything that we agreed and more. And therefore, what I do with any time remaining is none of your business. Equally, if it takes more hours to achieve all of those things, then that happens as well. But I manage my time such that that is the exception. The norm is I work under those hours. So there's a bit of game playing perhaps that is required, but I justified that on the basis of, well, if you're going to play hard with me, I'll play hard back. I don't know if anyone thinks about the morals of all of that, but my experience is that we actually do have more flexibility than we often think. So thanks. Lots of new things coming into the chat. We'll have a look at those. Meantime, Stavros, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Lovely to hear all the wonderful experiences and also the vulnerable struggles that you've shared. In the same spirit, to keep it brief, the question I have is, how can one communicate respectfully uh, delays that are not due to professional reasons, but rather dealing and managing chronic pain or chronic health conditions, but to do that in a way that colleagues can understand respectfully.
Yeah, it's a challenging one. So I've just recently been doing this with a number of colleagues. Yeah, I'm managing my mental health, but it has been the poorest it has been for many years. I had a conversation with my line manager to say, look, I think I need to take some time out in January, and I want to try and move as much as I can out of January, and really take some intensive time to try and sort some stuff out. Um, And I've got professional help behind me, which is always kind of helpful and kind of advice about what I need to do. And so it's not just kind of an endless pit. I'm kind of saying that there's a purpose. This is what I'm going to do, and there should, in theory, be an effect of that. Um, and so I've sent emails to various work colleagues, and I've just simply said for health reasons, nothing more, nothing less. For health reasons, I'm having to take a substantial amount of time out in January. There's a bit of flex, push and pull. I'm hoping that I'll be able to stay on top of urgent emails, but the chances are that I'm going to be out, and I want you to be able to kind of count me out for January. What are the things that I can move, and what are the things that absolutely will have to be done? And there are a bunch of things that absolutely will have to be done. I cannot get out of them. And so then there's a conversation to be had with those people about the quality of work that might happen then, depending on how things go that month, where I might need to be a little bit more honest with them one-on-one. Where I have had to do that, I'll do that. Yeah, face to face with someone. I'll ask them for confidentiality. And in this particular last bout, there was something that I could not do face to face, and it was because of my mental health issue, and I had to speak to the funder about it because the funder it was a condition of the contract that I had to be there face to face, and I said, look, it is not going to happen, and I ended up bursting into tears, and there was about 8 people on this call. It was kind of mortifying, but at the end of the day, I was, yeah, you know what? You are being hard-nosed on this. I cannot do this. I have to try and explain why and how. And yeah, away we went. But that's my approach. I leave full honesty as a last resort, and hopefully it doesn't end in tears. But very rare, very, very rarely does someone push you that hard that you have to go full honesty.
Thank you so very much.
Liebe.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for this workshop. We all appreciate it, I think. Just a question. How do you deal with erratic workloads? Example, you're given a workload during the summer. During the summer, this workload changes 2, 3 times. Then in September, it changes again. Seemingly, it changes in your favor, but that's just seemingly because at the end of November, those hours that were canceled from your workload all of a sudden appear back and even more, and they're scheduled for your second term.
Oh, wow. That's hard.
So how do you deal with that? I am in this story for already 2, 3 years.
Wow.
And I have a young child,
Mm.
which means that, I mean, I can do a lot of work, but it needs to be predictable.
Mhm.
So I just can't square it all. And if somebody gives me advice on this, I would be really grateful because I've gone to 0.8
Mhm.
trying to deal with this, but it seems to me that I'm still in the same situation. So I would appreciate any advice. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So I think there are two types of cause here, and I'll bring Sarah's comment into the chat here, which is that you are that unpredictability. I put in an hour, but actually this thing has taken 3 hours, and an hour's gone, and I'm only a third of the way through this thing. So that's the other form of unpredictability when I'm trying to diarize things that then knocks everything off. And so let's look at your challenge first, which is that unpredictability is external. It keeps coming into your diary. And I think, first of all, in answer to both of these sources of uncertainty, one of the answers is to try and purposefully build redundancy into your diary, into your calendar. Now, it sounds like that's probably not going to work, given this is large amounts of time that are coming into your diary. So we'll look at some other options, fear not. But for many of us, just building that redundancy in is a useful way of dealing with that. And so what I do is I have the end of my day. So the goal is no appointments after 3 p.m., at least not ones that I'm making. Worst case scenario, 4 p.m. And so ideally, I've got a couple of hours at the end of the day that I can use for my email. That's when I'm going to leave the majority of my emails to, when I've got least brain power. But also any other just things that have come up. So I'll have checked my email, flagged things I need to follow up. Yeah, there's a bunch of things I'm going to have to follow up from this. And I just power through all of those kind of annoying tasks at the end of the day. But what that also means is that when that 1 hour task turns out it's going to take 3 hours, okay, so that 2 hours at the end of the day, I'm basically going to shove my email into the next day. And I'm going to spend that time now catching up with that task that obviously is going to take a lot longer. And I've got time that I can play with across my week if I need to kind of rejig things. The next approach then is kind of a priorities type thing. So this morning, last week, I was meant to be delivering for a contract, a piece of consultancy work. I'd put aside an entire day. And it turns out it was a day when I could do nothing but cry. And so last Monday I cried. And in the middle of the day, emailed the funder and said, "Look, I've got a problem here. Can you give me a bit more time?" But the problem I had was that was the day that I had scheduled for it. And I don't have another day. And so I then went and looked through everything that I'd got scheduled, and sadly, it's a paper. I'm co-author on a paper. The lead author had said, "Can everyone try and get their inputs before Christmas?" And I went back and I said, "Look, I am still going to try. It is now looking unlikely that I'll be able to do this." That email triggered a bunch of other people saying, "Yeah, you know what? A before Christmas deadline was a bit crazy anyway." And great. And that's what I've been doing this morning. And I will continue this afternoon with time I'd reserved for paper writing. I guess the final thing to say then, where you've got this level of unpredictability, is to ask how acceptable this actually is. And your story is not actually normal, I'm going to suggest, especially if this is around teaching. There is usually, every now and then, someone has quit. We need someone to step up and to fill in for this person who's just quit. And I think we all accept every now and then you're going to have a much heavier teaching semester because you're in a team and you know that others will do that for you if you get sick, for example. But if this is happening year in, year out, that is unusual. And personally, I would say that's not acceptable. And so I would be now talking to line managers. I'd be talking to others who have the same experience and going collectively, if possible, to try and get some kind of change at a higher level. And if that doesn't work, I'd be looking for another job. But that's a bit of an extreme response. I don't know. What are your reactions to that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's where my thoughts go. And I mean, the problem with the first solution that you suggested is that I have a young child, so I need to finish work early anyway, because I need to do school run and so on. So I need to work the evening to catch up. So what I'm trying to say is that building that redundancy in my schedule and finish earlier, that's very difficult anyway. But what you said, that you need to talk to your line manager and think of another job. I'm lately even thinking of another career, although I love what I do. I wanted to teach my entire life, and have the job that I have now. So I just, yeah, I mean, are there places where it is not like that? Or
Yes, and that is the norm. In every place. So I've worked in four different universities, and across I work across every university in the UK, and I can say that the norm is that there is a level of predictability. The unpredictability comes when you've got someone off sick or who has quit in terms of teaching, and that is not a year-to-year thing, that it just changes every year. So that is definitely not normal. But if you're worried about it, go do your research. So when I moved to Birmingham City University, I had some. I'd been in a position in a university that was just rife with bullying from top to bottom. And when I quit, my number one criterion was I want to work in a friendly place. And so I did my due diligence. I spoke to lots of people, and it turned out to be 100% true. Birmingham City University is one of the friendliest universities that I know, and it was a delight to work there. But it's something you find out from talking to real people, and I'd recommend doing that.
Thank you.
Samar, over to you. Some of the stuff in the chat, I'm going to come to it, and yeah, we'll make sure that we go to the break in time. I want to give you one task before the break, so 5 more minutes of discussion. Samar, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really helping me to understand my own thinking way and what I'm going through. The discussion we had so far, I'll be taking it into another dimension. I'm at the ECR stage, although it's been few years since completed my PhD, but I'm still considering myself catching up on my progression as well as the development of research focus. So, what I want to ask is how to relate that motivation, values, and identity with the motivation and prioritizing the research focus. So far, I've found myself interested in 110 ideas. I've been grabbing whatever opportunity came my way, and there had been um, things, whichever job I had. So, whatever research focus or the subject area I had, I went through that. I've been through several different departments with various research focus and different research clusters. And now I'm at that stage where I really want to align my identity and values with what I do rather than I keep doing with,
Yeah,
whichever department I land into.
yeah.
But I don't have answer to that and how to find it. If you can help me on that, please.
Yeah, so this is the process we're going to go through. So we're going to move to the workshop mode really quickly now, and we'll stay in workshop mode and we'll keep doing this. But the first step is to make a small amount of time on a regular basis for a very specifically designed task or action that you're going to come up with in these exercises. It's not about shifting your entire job to being what I love all the time and I'm super motivated about, and it's all values based. Although, yeah, that would be a nice goal in the long run. But this is not about, yeah, it's about small amounts of time. And yeah, perhaps as a result, over the course of my career, I begin to shift and move into jobs and roles that are increasingly values based. But that's a much longer task. Devon in the chat is saying that there's this. Oh, sorry. We've got no Imogen. Sorry. Um, sorry. No, that was it has something that I had tagged here and I've lost it. There's so many things in the chat here. Yeah, so conflicts that are in values that are in conflict with each other. We're going to look at that specifically after the break. And someone's saying, can I share the PDF? Yeah, feel free. Just open it online. Yeah, someone is saying part of the challenge is that you take time off, you protect it, but then you've got all of this pressure of things to do for work that distracts you, so you're not fully present. You feel guilty. Um, and as a result, the solution to that is, okay, I'll just do some work, and that will alleviate the guilt and take a few things off my to-do list. And I'm going to suggest that this is ultimately a matter of discipline, which is quite a difficult answer, sorry. But do a bit of a thought experiment. What if now you have children, for example? Imagine that. What if you get some kind of physical disability that now means you have to work 50% of your hours? What would that do to your ability to prioritize? And most people will cut out a bunch of things that they don't really need to do, they don't have to prioritize just to get the basics done. And we're going to have a look at some techniques after the break that can help you identify what some of those things are. But part of the problem is that we just got all these things on my to-do list, and it's about ticking them all off. And what I'm going to suggest is in those weekends that, yes, you've got a to-do list on your phone. Yeah, that things occur to me. Great, I add it to my to-do list. But I make a concrete rule, no work. And I find some way of remaining accountable to that, whether that's the time that I'm spending doing other things, which I'm now booking. I'm joining clubs, I'm going to a gym or whatever. I'm booking this in so that I have to now be doing other things at the weekend, but some form of discipline that requires you to not do that. And now when I go into my week, it's not just a case of, well, I ticked a bunch of things off my to-do list and it's shorter. I'm actually thinking much more clearly about what are the most important things that I need to do. And some of those things that I would have picked off quickly at the weekend, I discover, you know what, wasn't really that important. And I'll do it at the end of the day really quickly when I'm too brain dead to do anything else, and it still gets done, and I protected my weekend. Okay, so apologies, I have not got through all of the questions in the chat, but I want to move to one task before we start. Oops, here we are. Before we go to the break. So what I need you to do is, well, in fact, you can do this over the break if you like. That's maybe how we'll do this. I'll explain it to you just now, and you can find yourself a piece of paper, do this over the break. So you're going to start by just getting a piece of paper, turn it landscape. To one side, you're going to draw a circle with a dot in the middle. We're making a pie chart. The other sides, start just listing different identities. Do a bullet list. We're looking for a minimum of 5, maximum of 10 to make this doable in the time. Of course, you can add to this later if you want. An easy way to start is work identities and non-work identities. You've got some examples on screen there. But once you've come up with a few, then I want you to put them into this pie chart. And I want you to make the size of each segment proportional to its importance to you, not the amount of time you get to spend doing those things. So there could be things that are important parts of you that you haven't, I haven't exercised this creative part of myself since I was a child, perhaps, since I was at university, maybe, I don't know. But it's still a part of who I am. It's how I see myself. And then finally, I'd like you to have a think about some of the values that might inspire, animate, underpin those different parts of who you are. If you're struggling with the idea of values, you might want to think of qualities or character traits, beliefs, guiding principles, those kind of things. Some of these may already be values, creativity as a value, but maybe there's something else beneath this, curiosity that drives that. They can be positive, they can be negative. I did this with a colleague who one of his identities was angry man. And when he thought about it, he realized that actually the value underpinning his angry man identity was justice. He'd experienced injustice growing up that had shaped who he was, and actually it had shaped his entire research career and the questions that he had asked and was asking in his research. And that was what empowered and motivated how he channeled that anger into good things. So I'm looking for one or two. If you can get more than that, then great. They don't all have to be underpinned by values. I'll leave that on screen as you're going to the break. We're going to come back, we're going to take a chunky break. We'll come back at 12 o'clock. So half an hour to both do this exercise, take as long as you want on it, and take a break. Any issues, any questions, or did you manage to complete your task?
I am kind of there, still thinking, trying to figure out the values and its overlap. So
Yeah.
I spent all that time in thinking, but that was very useful. Um, it it has helped me to put that on paper, what was in my head. But I was thinking rather than in a circle, there are multiple layers of that circle in which I'm existing. And I'm still figuring out for the responsibilities, not the responsibilities, for the values, whether those are my made up things or um, I don't have the word to specify what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
but I'm still on it. I've got a very good circle with some points in it, and it's not that much in the inner circle
Mm.
where I was thinking who I am, and I was able to actually put few things on the side, which I was thinking, oh, is that a value? But it isn't. So on the importance scale, it is aligning much better now in my thinking.
Good. Yeah, so it doesn't matter too much how you do this. I've seen various people who've created pies within pies and said, actually, this goes around the outside because it affects everything. And there's lots of ways you can think
Yeah.
about it. Keep things simple to follow the instructions as I've given them, but I'm very happy for you to be creative as well. So do feel free to do that. Distinguishing between the identities and the values, as I've said, there is a bit of overlap between them, and that's quite normal as well. And a few people saying how hard it was just to actually get those segments right in terms of what is most important. So actually, I probably should have said it's quite handy to do it with a pencil, so you can rub things out and change your opinion. But I think that's the hardest part of it, really working out, yeah, if I were to put these in priority order, which ones are actually most important to me. Um, but yeah, various people also saying that they found it quite useful, and already realizing that balance is a bit off, perhaps. And yeah, the why, well, we'll maybe come on to that a bit more just in a moment. Yeah, Elaine and I quite often do the same thing. I'll kind of suggest people start with family or so work and non-work and then subdivide. It's quite a nice way to do it. A stacked bar chart instead of a pie. Well done. Be creative. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is a second task and to have a think about this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to vote on this in a moment. So you can do this in your own time. If you have time, you can actually draw another pie chart. This time, making the size of each segment proportional to the amount of time you get to spend on average being, expressing, living out of those parts of yourselves. How different would it be? And in particular, I'm wondering, are there segments that are quite large? Important. Apologies. There we go. Okay. Let's see if that makes a difference. Okay. I'm not sure if it was just me experiencing that weird feedback, but it seems to have fixed itself. Good. So, which in particular, large segments, they're important to you, especially if they're underpinned by important values that you're thinking and you're realizing, you know what, that is really squeezed. It's way smaller in terms of the amount of time I get to spend. Maybe it's entirely absent, pretty much, in terms of the amount of time that I get to spend being in those parts of myself. And that's where I want you to focus your attention. And before you worry too much, we're going to do a little voting exercise, and then we're going to go move into pairs. And we're going to start thinking about things we could do to spend more time in those specific areas. And this is not necessarily about the number of minutes you spend. Potentially, it's more about the quality of the time that you spend in these areas. The suggestion being that when you find something in one of those more squeezed areas, you're going to find something that is going to create a much more powerful feedback loop to your motivation, hence to your focus. And already, just simply by prioritizing that, you'll have this sense of coming back into alignment and having better work-life balance before the actual work-life balance has caught up with it. So it's really powerful once we get that laser focused attention on the areas that are most important. So, what I'd like you to do is to have a think about this. I'm going to open this poll. Oh, and my poll is not populated as I had expected it to be. There we go. So I'm just going to put these as kind of a 1-2 type thing because I'm doing this as we speak. So I'll leave this on screen. And there we go. So how are you aligned when I compare identity pie chart to time pie chart? The time pie chart in your head. Sorry, we don't have time to do it on paper. And for some of us, it's actually quite an emotional task because we are asking which parts of us feel most squeezed. And there is a real emotional kind of feeling as I look at this pie chart and identify the bits that are most squeezed. Okay, that's more than half of us voted now. I'm just going to give you 5 seconds to think about this and respond now. 2, 1, and we'll finish it there. So on screen, we can see that we have 4 of us who are in the fortunate position of having time to act out of and express all the most important parts of ourselves. If that is you, tell me if this is not the case, but most people who have this answer actually say that they are happy in their work, they feel satisfied at work, and that they have good enough work-life balance. I say good enough. Your task, I'm going to suggest in this next session, is to ask how you can build on success and be able to find even more motivation in work and even better work-life balance. We can always do better. For those of you who answered 1, 2, and 3, which is the vast majority of us, then you will typically, most people who answer these questions this way say that they don't feel that satisfied in work. Those who are answering 1 and 2 in particular, and that they do not have adequate work-life balance. And again, 1 and 2, you're really quite likely to feel very squeezed in terms of work-life balance. But of course, the good news is that there is an answer to this, as I was alluding to in the previous slide, and that's what we're going to do now in our breakout rooms. So we're going to do this in pairs. So do wait around until I get everyone organized into a pair. It may take a minute for your partner to join, but fingers crossed it won't be too long a wait. And I want you to focus on these important identities, the large segments, especially if they're underpinned by important values. But you get to choose which ones to share. I'm not expecting anyone to ask the other person to show me your pie chart because there could be confidential things in this. And if you're working in a shared office, can I please just make you aware to be very careful with that paper? You fold it up, you put it in your pocket. Afterwards, you don't leave it lying around with personal information on it. So you choose which of these you want to bring. An area that you feel is particularly squeezed or where you would like to make particular progress. And the idea is now to discuss actions that you could do on a regular basis, ideally in that half an hour, working up to an hour on a Monday morning, or just starting with 10 minutes, but aiming for half an hour every morning before you start work. Before we do this, a couple of tips. So as I was saying earlier, the problem is that we don't have time. I can't suddenly wind back the clock till before I got this job or before I had children or whatever else it might be. The reality now is I do not have the time that I used to have. And so one of the things can be about thinking about the quality of the time that you have. So if this is, I don't get enough time with my parents or my friends, can you start thinking, well, okay, it's not about getting more time, but the time I do have, how can we make that really count and be much more high quality time, for example? And get creative. This is why I want to do this in a paired discussion, because my experience is that when we discuss this, we help each other come up with creative ideas. And if you can, try and help your colleague think about how they might be accountable as well. We'll build that into this. So an example it was a colleague who said that it was the friend part of her identity that was particularly squeezed. And the reason that she had suddenly realized why this was so important to her was that it was linked to a value called loyalty. And she'd just been kind of, yeah, it's just niggling at the background and ignoring it. And this exercise made her realize, yeah, that's why this is bugging me. Because I know that my two best friends have been having a really hard time. But family life, work life is such that we've kind of lost touch, and I have not been there for them. And that feels bad because loyalty is a really important value to me. And so that very day, she reached out to them and she said, so what do you say? We've all got kids and jobs, etc. We're losing touch, but a city break 1 year from now. That's enough time to arrange childcare, to make a plan. We're going to have to now be in regular touch with each other to make a plan, discuss what we're going to do, and be accountable on that because we've agreed on this weekend. And fantastic. There was just this sense of I'm back in touch. We've got this weekend to look forward to, and I'm being a friend now. And it was a small thing, a very small thing compared to the amount of time she used to spend, but it enabled her to bring that part back into alignment. So I'm going to encourage you to be as creative as you can, help your colleague as much as you can. So thank you everyone for taking the time. Let's see, where are we? So we've got, so we've got just half an hour at this point. And what I'd like to get you all to do is to report back in the chat. So I'd like you to focus, if you can, on the actions. If there is any kind of accountability mechanism that you identified, write that in as well. And if you struggled to come up with any kind of action in the zone that was most squeezed in your discussion, then read what everyone else is writing, because there's a very good chance that someone else will have an action that could fit into where you need some actions that are small enough, accountable enough that you're actually going to be able to do these on a regular basis. So just a minute or so of quiet writing time. I'd like everyone to, or everyone who has something to share Focusing on the actions. What are you going to do based on this conversation? Yeah, let's try and add in a bit of accountability. So if you haven't got that far, now's the time to start thinking. Rosie, on marketing, as a small business owner myself, I can relate to that. It's the one thing that you never prioritize, but you know that you really ought to. Is there some kind of way in which you could be accountable on that? Is there someone else you know in a similar kind of situation? Could you both meet up once a month and do a shut up and market session? Who knows? Maybe you can get more creative than that. We've got Reem looking to explore new collaborations. Yeah, what is the actual action? It'd be nice to know exactly what you're going to do. Is that about connecting with someone on a regular basis in that time? Is it about a networking thing, events that you're planning to go to? And yeah, Samantha, putting yourself and your PhD writing first. And yeah, most other people can wait, actually. Give it a try. Certainly as a PhD student, that's my experience. Fantastic. So if you haven't got any great ideas, scan through these. Lots of real gems in there. And I'm looking forward to finding out how you all get on with that. So I said after the break that we would have a look at a bit of psychology that explains how this works. And I'm going to use this as a vehicle to make a couple of final points, which will then lead into a slightly larger group discussion. This is known as goal hierarchy theory, and it explains from a psychological perspective why this works. So if I get you to do a little thought experiment, I'm going to give you the whole of tomorrow off. It's a work day, but your entire calendar has been cleared. Every deadline has been cleared. You can do whatever you want. What would you choose to do? And what most of us do is we find a task that can help realign us with our identities and values. And so what we do is we find tasks that are a priority because they help us to express part of who we are and they align with an important value. And so when all of these are aligned, we feel good, we feel consonant. But there is a dissonance psychologically when we are misaligned. And if we have to do tasks day in, day out that are not a priority for us, that are not authentic to who we are, that are against our values, then of course you can see why those tasks are demotivating us, driving distraction, or worse. And so on screen, you can see these two kind of idealized people with aligned goals. And we've got this person who is driven by a curiosity value that feeds their identity as an expert because they love prioritizing research. And that means that given the day off tomorrow, they're going to produce a paper or chip away at that paper. And these people seem to just manage to write papers. Why is that? And it's because of that alignment. I'm more like the person on the right-hand side. One of my values might be empathy, which is what inspires this kind of knowledge broker person who's always connecting people and ideas because I want to make a difference in the real world. And that's why if you give me the day off, I'll prioritize something like a policy brief. And people like me, yeah, have papers on back burners, but I do actually get impact done when I get that chance. And so what I'm going to suggest is that this as a framework not only explains what is going on here, but it can also give you a solution to competing identities and values, which a number of us have spoken about. So the first is task ranking. So we're all familiar with the idea that we've got a to-do list and we'll rank it based on the most urgent and important things. What about instead ranking by values and identities? Values is probably the easiest one, but if there are identities that you feel, yeah, this task takes me away, it's inauthentic, this is against my values, then I want you to put them right at the bottom. And there are other things which are really consonants. Yeah, that fits. I like that. Other things, yeah, I can't rank it in that way. It doesn't work. But the key thing is that you can usually identify a few things which are taking you away from your identity and your values. And your task now is to work out, how can I specifically focus on getting rid of those tasks? If I can't get rid of them, can I shorten them? Could I delegate them? Could I just not say yes next time? And most academics find that there's usually at least one thing at the bottom of that newly ranked list that they could do something about. If there are lots of things there that you can do nothing about, then the second thing that this theory suggests that you can do is something called task integration. And the idea now is that I'm going to try and find a task that I am deeply motivated by, that I can now integrate with this thing that I really don't want to do. And now, as a joint task, I'm motivated by the part of it that is aligned, and so the bit that isn't just gets done. And so, in this idealized person, we've got someone who's been told they've got to do an impact evaluation, in no way motivated. I'm a researcher. I don't do impact, let alone impact evaluations. I prioritize research when I can, aligned with my expert identity and curiosity value. But if I turn this into a bit of a research project, I'm going to write a paper about this because I'm actually really curious about whether this is working in policy or practice. And there's a research output now, then great, I'm prioritizing research and I'm using my expertise and I'm being curious. Same goes for impact. So yeah, that book that's been on back burner for years, and I just never seem to get around to it because given the chance, I'll always prioritize impact in line with this identity as a broker who is empathic. So if I now tell myself, well, okay, let's find a conference, an event, a consultation, the government consultation that I could feed this into. Now I need to get this done to a standard that I'm comfortable enough to write that consultation response or present in that more external environment. And great, I'm doing it and I'm loving it. And I've got a deadline that I'm perfectly happy to work to. And it turns out I've pretty much finished writing the paper. So try this out, see what you think. I'm going to give you some time to discuss this if you want. But if possible, I'd like you to have a think about something a bit deeper. And it is this idea of authenticity. We're talking here about our work identities. And yet many of us don't feel that we can be truly authentic in work. The definition you can see on screen here is Brené Brown's definition of authenticity. And I'm going to suggest that it is this negative feedback loop, the people-pleasing, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, that is one of the things, or many of the things, depending on how many you suffer from, that prevent us from having the courage to fully be ourselves at work. And so how do we tackle this? Well, as I've been alluding to, it's about our self-esteem. And there are lots of different ways that we can attack this. So it could be our relational esteem. I have value because others value me. Great, we all need to know that we are loved. But at the same time, that can drive people-pleasing if it becomes toxic. Achievement-based self-esteem, I need to know that what I do has value. Great, but this can drive workaholism and imposter syndrome. I just have to achieve this next thing to feel like I'm worth it. And so intrinsic self-esteem, unless of course you're a narcissist, is the safest thing. Can't really go too far wrong there. And it's where most of us need to focus our attention. So think about how you would rate yourself. It's not really a linear scale. It's more of a kind of a happy or sad kind of face type thing. You have a sense of where you have strength and where you could do work. And yeah, I wonder, what do we do to tackle these kinds of challenges? So I'm going to give you small-ish groups, but bigger than last time. And if you're struggling to get to these more personal, more challenging questions, then you can start with this idea of task ranking or task integration and how you deal with competing priorities. I'm going to put this into the chat so that you've got this in the chat for your discussion. And if you can, let's keep this nice and positive. Yeah, sometimes I suffer from people pleasing. This is how I deal with it. And just get a flavor, a feel for what this is like across the group. And then we're going to do a group mindfulness exercise to conclude. That's where we're going. with this. So, welcome back, everyone. What I'd like you to do now, penultimate task, is to just stand back from this conversation and ask yourself, how does it feel to have had a conversation like this with your colleagues? And one of the first things that a lot of us realize at this point is that there's this feeling that we're no longer alone. And the feeling that you have, I'm going to suggest, is the first step towards self-compassion. There's a lot of work that's been done on how people gain self-compassion. And one of the first steps you have to take is to recognize that you are not alone. One of the reasons we beat ourselves up so much is because we feel like this shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be feeling like this. I need to just somehow tough up, get through. Everyone else is, after all. And to realize, actually, this is a normal response to the things that happen in life as an academic. And I'm not alone means that you begin to actually say, you know what, actually, it's okay to feel like this. And now that I own that, I can start to actually do something about that. And of course, the first step towards building a more compassionate culture in our work, a more compassionate society, ultimately is that first step towards self-compassion. In the email that I send to you, I'm going to share with you some links to my own writing on how to overcome these challenges. Maybe that's useful for you. My hope is that you've learned things from your colleagues and that there is now a moment for that much deeper reflection. I have just one task left for you at this point. I'm going to make room for some more discussion at the end if anyone wants, but also if people need to get going and get a break before their next meeting, I want to finish early as well. And your final task is to actually take that first step towards whatever the thing is that you discussed or read in the chat, or maybe wrote in the chat earlier. Put it onto your to-do list, put it into your calendar, send that email or text message, or whatever that first step is. And as you're doing that, I'm going to conclude by just reading parts of the conclusion of my book. So this book and our course today started with a personal desire to understand how a small number of close colleagues and I were achieving higher than average levels of productivity. The answers to my questions took me, and hopefully you as well, to a much deeper than anticipated level of personal reflection. Part of me hopes that as a result, you will become significantly more productive. Another part of me hopes for something deeper, a new way of thinking about productivity, which is less about the work you produce and more about how you produce it. At the heart of this book and today's course is a type of productivity that is about producing a clearer conception of you. It's about seeing your unique, intrinsic value more clearly than ever before and being able to express that in your work life consciously from moment to moment. Remember why you first wanted to be a researcher. Remember your most inspiring achievement as a researcher. Remember who you are. When you remember why you're doing what you're doing, you'll do it for the right reasons, and you'll do it better. The fact that this enables you to cut out unnecessary tasks and become highly focused and productive is merely a byproduct of reigniting your motivation and starting to seek your most important priorities. The lessons in this book and this course will make you more productive, but they will also make you more satisfied with what you produced. And I hope they will enable you to be happy, working less and being more. Thank you, everyone. Good luck with whatever tasks you are planning, and I'm very happy to stay behind for any questions for anyone who wants to just hang around for some informal chat or questions. Take care, enjoy your lunch. See you.